Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'll just allow a few more minutes for the rest to join, and then we can start right off. So, welcome to those who just joined us. Thank you for joining in. So, welcome to today's session. This marks our last webinar as part of our series, as part of our Tourism 4.0 project. So, today's session, we have business mentor and leadership coach Enda Larkin from Dobiquity. He has a fantastic presentation prepared, so I hope you enjoy it. Over to you, Enda.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see the slides, Martina? Everything?
Yes,
okay?
Perfectly.
Okay, well, look, I realize you're all very busy people. So first of all, my name is Enda Larkin, as Martina said, and I'm founder and managing director of a company called Dobiquity. So I know you're busy people, so we get straight into it. And I've put together what I hope is an interesting presentation for you. But just before we do that, I'll, for 20 seconds, just give you a little bit about my own background, because I think it helps if you understand what I've done and where I come from in terms of knowledge and skills. So my background originally was in hotel management. That's what I studied. And then I held senior management positions in Ireland, in the UK, and I managed a 40-bedroom hotel in the US for a couple of years. And I'd always wanted to set up my own business. So I set my first business up in the mid-90s, which probably gives away my age a little bit. But I set that up, and it was a training and consulting business. And I worked mainly with hospitality and tourism enterprises, and I did a lot of work again around Europe. I did a lot of work in the Middle East, in Jordan, and Yemen, and Dubai, and I did some work in Asia as well, in the Philippines. And as part of that, I was heavily involved with quality models like the EFQM. I was a mentor and assessor, but I also did a lot around management development. So a big part of what I did then and what I do now is around developing people. And in 2016, I set up my current business, Dobiquity, because I could see the shift to digital, and I could see that SMEs were being left a little bit behind in terms of digitization. So Dobiquity is an online quality management and continuous improvement platform, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. And as well as running that business, I also am a leadership coach, and I've written a lot around business excellence and leadership, and mainly because it's a passion of mine. So look, I just tell you that so to give you a little bit of background as to who I am. I never use the word expert, but as I say, I've been around the block a couple of times, so I think I have a few insights that will be valuable to you. So very quickly, what are we going to do in the next 15 or 20 minutes? We're going to talk about this VUCA world, and some of you will be familiar with VUCA and some of you won't. So I'll just explain that. And VUCA essentially just describes this rapidly changing world that we're in now and we're moving into. And then we'll talk about what implications that world has for us personally. So we'll start there. And then for our businesses, particularly SMEs. And then we'll talk a little bit about how technology can help SMEs thrive in that VUCA world. And I'll close by giving you some examples of what we do at Dobiquity and how we've helped SMEs navigate this kind of rapidly changing world. So I've tried to make it as interesting as I can. I think you get a couple of good insights, and I promise I won't go over, certainly won't go over 20 minutes, but it'll be in and around 15, between 15 and 20 minutes. And I think the slides and the presentation will be available as well, if I'm correct. So maybe an interesting place to start and just show you that picture. And I'm sure many of you will have heard that recently in Las Vegas, they opened up something called the Sphere, which is like a dramatic leap forward. It's hugely innovative in terms of a entertainment complex and a place for festivals and concerts. And it's really is a giant leap forward, and it's going to rapidly change the way that entertainment and concerts work around the world. But what's interesting about it, in this very big technology leap, you've got a couple of old men really who are the first headliners. Bono and U2 are the first residents there, and they're in their 60s. So you've got an interesting dynamic there with massive innovation and somebody who's been around the block like myself for a while. And even last week, we saw the release of the Beatles, the last Beatles singles, which is integrating AI to take an old John Lennon song. You know the story, but that's driven by Ringo and Paul, and they're both in their 80s. So one of the things that's interesting when you talk about technology, it's about mindsets. And coping with this changing world we live in, the starting point is not about age or where you are in your life or career. It's your mindset. And as a business, it's the mindset of the people in your team. And if we've got the right mindset towards embracing change, then that will influence the way we think and the way we behave, and then that will influence our success or not. So that's the starting point when we talk about how do I thrive and cope, and how do I navigate this complex world that we are now in and we're moving in. So starting point for me is mindset and how we think, and then everything else stems from that. And it's not an exaggeration to say that change is everywhere and that it's accelerating. And this guy is an interesting guy. If you want to look him up on Google, he's a guy called Ray Kurzweil, sorry. And he was director of engineering with Google up till about 2000, year 2000. He resigned and he became what's known as a futurist. And he started to predict out the future. And he did a 20-year predictions back in 2000. So we can now see his accuracy rate. He's 85% accurate. So he's done another 20 years now to 2040. And we'll see how accurate it is. But one of his quotes, which really resonated with me, is he's saying we won't experience 100 years of progress this century. It'll be more like 20,000 years of progress at today's rate. Now, a lot of people are afraid of that. And I'm not, and I don't think any of us should be. But whether he's 100% accurate or not, he's 100% accurate about change and the acceleration of change. Because when change happens, particularly in technology and AI, this law of accelerating change kicks in. So the key message there is, whether you agree with the exact prediction, is that that's the world we're moving into, and we need to embrace that. And if you stand still as a person and or as a business, you're going to get left behind. It's as simple as that. And so it's nothing to be afraid of, but you have to do something to live in that world. And that's really what I'd like to talk about now, is this VUCA idea. And to do that, I want to talk about what we call 5 domains of life. And sometimes your own life, and particularly if you look back to your parents' generation, life was very ordered, very structured. And today it's a bit more disordered. So it's not as clear what's happening. And on the ordered side, and when we look back at our parents and before that, lots of things were stable. Things, it's not like there was no change, but it was slow change. Sure, they had challenges at different times, like oil crises and all of that, but they could largely predict the future. Whereas now we live in a more disordered side, so lots of change. And in fact, it's not just change, it's disruption. And that disruption is happening in all aspects of our life. It's not just about AI and technology and business, it's in the social world, it's how we communicate, all of how people think about work, all of those things. And the fifth domain of life is every now and again we get a crisis that rattles us, changes. Think COVID here. And that drives change quite quickly. So COVID changed a lot in our world, and it actually changed the way people think about work. So we've got to be conscious of that as well. Now, the natural human state is to say, I like stability. Like people don't, they have a fear of change, but those days are gone. We now live in this world, and that's only going to accelerate. There's going to be more change. There's going to be more disruption. And whatever happens in the future, we're not going back to that more stable world. Again, I'm not saying that to be scared of that world. I'm just saying to be aware of it. And that's really what VUCA is about. It describes that world we live in today and into the future. So when we talk about what is VUCA, it's about four things. There's a lot more volatility in our business, personal work, all aspects of our life. Like if you think 3 weeks ago, we wouldn't be talking about the Middle East the way we are. Very volatile situation. 2 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about Ukraine. Look what's happening across in migration in Europe. Look what's happening in the US politically, all of that. So there's a lot of volatility there. And because of that volatility, there's a lot more uncertainty in the world. And that has implications for us as people and as businesses. And then things are just more complex now. And to go back to what I said earlier, even though it's only a couple of years, the difference in people now in their attitudes to work after the pandemic than before is quite significant. People have changed because they got a chance to stand back from life, get paid, not have to work every day. And people kind of said, well, what does work mean to me? I want something more out of my life. So even managing people is more complex. And because of all of that, then the future is ambiguous. It's not that clear. And as I say, that's not the place to be scared of, but you can't stand still in that world. If you stand still as a person or as a business, you're going to quickly get left behind. So we need to talk a little bit then about how are we going to cope with that world. And just want to say something a little bit about how the brain works. I'm not going to get too scientific about it, but so this is a simplification, but it's an accurate simplification. The brain likes the familiar. It always reverts to the familiar, what it knows, okay? And there's an evolutionary reason for that. Over millennia, as we developed as human beings, we had to go through famines and various stages where resources, i.e. food and energy, were scarce. So the brain has evolved to do two things. How much can I do for the minimum amount of energy? And the familiar allows the brain to do that. So when you drive to work and you're driving along in your car and you get to work and you think, I don't even remember the journey. Don't remember that trip at all. The brain can take you there because it knows the route, it knows how to drive a car. It's not that you're a danger to anyone, it just means that's familiar to you. Sadly, when you live in an unfamiliar world, the brain has to now work harder. So what happens to us is our cognitive load increases. Decisions that were easy before are not easy anymore. Dealing with people's situations at work that used to be straightforward are not easy anymore. Predicting the future is nigh on impossible. Dealing with volatile business situations, growth and not growth, up and down, that poses a lot of challenges for us. So we need to recognize the first impact that this VUCA world has on us is it increases the degree we have to think about things. It increases the stress levels on us. So you need to manage your ability to do that. So and be conscious of it. Smaller decisions that you would have just made based on the familiar a few years ago require more thought now. And that's going to accelerate. Dealing with technology that we're all comfortable with will not be as comfortable when AI kicks in and all of the other things. So that's the first thing. When you move from the familiar to the unfamiliar, that has personal consequences. It also has consequences for your people that work for you, and you need to be conscious of those. We're dealing in a more stressful world. So how do I stay relevant and maintain my personal competitiveness in this VUCA world? I'm going to introduce you to something called I's, T's, and X's. So when you go back, let's go back 50 years, and we talk about how you made yourself competitive in the world of work. You were known as what was called, you were an I. You had a deep specialism. It was about your IQ and as many degrees as you could get. And the more specialist you are, the more you succeeded. Because that's the world that was relevant then. It was your IQ that mattered most. But then maybe in the last 20 years, that wasn't enough because you didn't just have one career in your life. You kind of jumped jobs. So you needed to become what they called a T. You needed to put transferable skills as well as your specialist skills. And that was kind of today's world. You know, I've got a specialism. I can use it in different places. But as we move forward into this, your specialism is probably not going to be that good to you anymore because AI will replace a lot of the need for really specialist knowledge. So now you need to have what we call multiple skills across different specialisms, and you need multiple transferable skills. And the biggest transferable skills we're all going to need in the future is emotional intelligence. And if we had a longer session, we could do a session around the importance of that. So you need to recognize that in the future, doesn't matter what age you are, in the future, you're probably going to have 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 careers in one lifetime. And you're going to move where the opportunities are. And to be able to do that, you need multiple skills and you need multiple transferable skills. So that's the first thing you do is to make myself personally competitive into the future. I've got to think about stuff like that. And you've got to help your team members around this as well. Jobs that are easy to do now, that are this repetitive, they will replace quite quickly in the next 10 years. So how are we going to migrate to a world where people have broader skills that are transferred? So that's the first thing we need to think about in this VUCA world. The second thing we need to think about is how do I position myself for growth in that VUCA world? And I'm going to introduce you to a very simple, but I think it's a lovely little model that describes what we're all facing now and into the future. So life, and this applies to your personal life, by the way, inside and outside of work is always about two things. It's the level of challenge you have any day or any week, and the level of skills you have to meet those challenges. So it's always about one or the other. And sometimes the challenge is either high or low in our life, and sometimes the skills that we have are high or low. I feel like I'm skilled for this, or I don't have the skills. So that all of this fluctuates. So to build this little model, if you think of sometimes in your own life or somebody who's no challenge in their life anymore, so they're not really pushing themselves and they're not learning new things, we call that zone the stagnation zone. And you hear people saying, oh, I'm in a bit of a rut. And it happens to us all. None of you are in the stagnation zone because if you were, you wouldn't bother going on a webinar at 10:30 on a Wednesday morning. So anyone in business is rarely there, but you might have people on your team that are a bit stuck in their ways, or sometimes we fall into a rut. Usually none of it applies. The next one will apply to all of us is sometimes we have skill levels that are high, but there's no new challenge in our role. And you hear yourself saying things like, I could do that with my eyes closed. And that's known as our comfort zone. And the comfort zone is a nice place to be. The trick is in the name. It's comfortable. You're doing the same things all the time. But the danger with the comfort zone is not today. If you stay too long in your comfort zone, over a 5 or a 10-year period, that can become your stagnation zone. So when you're doing the same thing every day and you're going along, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means over the long term, it could be a bad thing. But what happens now in this VUCA world is suddenly the challenge jumps. Oh, things aren't the same anymore. And we move into what we call this anxious zone. And the anxious zone is a good place to be in the short term because it pushes you out of your comfort zone. But if you don't develop your skills to meet the new challenges, staying in that anxious zone is going to stress you out for the rest of your life. So you've got to recognize that the challenge is coming down the tracks at you, whether you like it or you don't. And the only way to meet those challenges is to grow your skill sets in the relevant areas. And that's what being in the growth zone is about. It's saying, look, where's the next challenge coming? And what do I need to meet that challenge? So a very simple challenge is around AI. That's coming down the tracks. Nothing's going to stop that. We've already seen it with ChatGPT and all the other things that's happening. So that's happening. The challenge is going upwards, whether you like it or you don't. The only way to meet that is to find out, how do I use ChatGPT? How do How do I master that challenge? And that's what being in the growth zone is about. It's not a mythical place. It's a place you put yourself saying, I'm not going to stand still in this world. Because if I do and stay in my comfort zone as the world moves around me, I'll find myself in a stagnation zone. And lots of people are going to end up there because they don't recognize this challenge. So the second thing you need to think about is, how am I developing myself? How am I developing my business? How am I developing my team to meet the new challenge that's coming at us, whether we like it or we don't? So that's the second thing on a personal level. First, we need to look at our skill sets and how transferable they are. And then we need personally to be conscious about how we move forward. Okay, so talked briefly about the personal challenges. Let's go back now to the business challenges that we're all going to face. So VUCA is going to be here to stay. These 4 dimensions are only going to accelerate. We're not going to move back to a time where there's no volatility, where everything's certain. So as business people, in SMEs in particular, we need to figure out ways to respond to that. And you're not powerless. That's the important point to recognize. We're not powerless in this world, but we as businesses, just like as people, if you stand still in the future, you're going to be left behind very, very quickly. Whereas 20 years ago, you could stand still and it might take 20 years to be found out. If you stand still now, it'll take you 2 years, you'll be obsolete. That's a fact. Don't want to be stark about it, but that's the seriousness of what we're facing. So a couple of things we can do as businesses, where there's lots of volatility, that's why you need a very clear, very coherent business vision. Where are we going? What are we trying to do? It doesn't mean you won't change direction, because circumstance, but it will force you to make that decision. Where you have no vision, you'll go this way this year, you go this way next year. You'll just go with what seems like the best. When you have a vision, it gives you something to aim for. And as I say, it doesn't mean you won't change it. But without that vision, in a VUCA world, you will be found out very quickly. So your business has to have clarity about what's unique about it. What are we adding to that? Where are we adding value to our customers? And where are we taking our customer base? What's our journey and how does it look? So that's the first thing you can do to fight in a volatile world. The second thing, when there's a lot of uncertainty, we need to develop our understanding. And you only develop your understanding through better use of data. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, because that's what we do at Dobiquity. So you only get better understanding about your business through data. So in the past, 4 or 5 of us in the business could sit around and say, I think our customers feel this way. I think they're going to like this. Or I think our employees. If you find yourself saying, I think, too often, you're in trouble. You need data. And what I find with SMEs, and I'm an SME myself, I've worked around SMEs for my whole career, is we tend to be good on financial metrics, but non-financial metrics, we're very poor on it. And that's not a criticism. We rely on gut feeling that we know our customers. And again, that might have worked, but when customers' demands are changing rapidly and market dynamics are changing, so data is going to be rapidly important. So we'll come back to that. Moving down to complexity, where you've got a lot of complexity in your world and in your business, you need more clarity, and you only get clarity through better communication. But again, what happens in SMEs is we're also busy coping with this world that we're in, is communication gets worse, not better. We don't have time for the meeting we used to have, or we have meetings that are unproductive. So the only way you get clarity in your business is better communication. So again, that's another factor to consider, and that's within our hands to improve. So we're not powerless here. The final one, when you're dealing with this vague and ambiguous word, the only way of coping in that world is becoming more agile as people and as a business. So you make your business agile by having very clear, simple, clean processes that can be changed quickly by using technology to streamline old processes, saving time, increasing efficiency, and moving away from the common challenge in SMEs of being busy every day to being impactful every day. And technology helps you make that leap. So if we had more time, I'd go through each of these and talk about how technology can help you, because there's technology solutions around strategy, there's technology solutions around communication, there's technology solutions around agility, but I want to focus in more on the understanding of particularly the data piece, because that's what we do at Dobiquity. So what we said so far is VUCA changes the dynamics of the future. And personally, we've got to work on our mindsets, our skill sets, and as businesses, we need to do things that address that volatility. And that's what we do at Dobiquity. We help SMEs, not exclusively, but certainly 80% in hospitality and tourism, to navigate this VUCA world. And we essentially do four things. We provide an easy to follow roadmap. I'll explain these in a bit more detail, that help businesses map out their future. So we give them things to think about and to plan and vision the future. And then we're the only business that puts multiple digital tools on the one platform. So instead of having to signing up in 10 different, you sign up in one place and you get access to different tools like customer surveys, training apps, checklist apps, and we talk about that. But the key thing is when you use any of those apps, you get data in areas you didn't have before. So you start being more data driven. And then when companies have that data, we give them insights and we help them interpret that data. And then we help them map their continuous improvement. So all we do with businesses is we give them a pathway to continuous improvement. So we help them not to stand still. And that's the critical point. If you stand still, as I say, you get left behind. So we help small SMEs keep moving forward. So I'll just quickly go through the four of these and then we'll wrap it up from there. So our roadmap takes the best practices of international quality models, but we simplify them for SMEs. So essentially 8 areas: purpose, direction, and culture are strategic, people, customers, processes, sustainability are operational, and results, financial and non-financial. And within each of those 8 areas, we say there's 10 things an SME should do to be better. And we make it very simple. There's no paperwork. We just say they're the 10 things, and we help businesses move forward. And to help them map that journey, then we give them these digital tools on the one platform. So we've got customer surveys, we've got a mystery shopper tool, we've got an employee survey, we've got an on-the-job training tool, and we've got a checklist app. So as I say, whether you want to use one or all of those tools, you just have to go to the one place. You don't have to have 4 different systems on the go. So it's a really tailored, and the tools do exactly what they say on the tin. So if you're using our checklist app, or you're using our customer survey or employee survey, that's generating data for you. Easy to interpret, very simple graphs, very simple images that you can look and say, oh, okay, that's what's working in my business. Oh, that's not working as well. Why? What do I need to do? And then we help you when you see the results say, okay, we give you different sources of advice. We do online and face-to-face mentoring. We've got how-to videos. We've got training videos. We've got a whole lot of tip sheets. So we help businesses look at their data, look at how they can improve. So they're getting better all the time. And that's helping them cope in this kind of volatile world. So just finally, to give you some examples, we've got a worldwide client base, and they're all SMEs, majority of them SMEs. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the kind of things we do with different companies. So this particular company is called the O'Donoghue Ring Collection. They're a small family hotel group in the south of Ireland. And they run 3 very good hotels. But we've been working with them for 2 years now to help them better understand their employees' needs. So they've done a lot of surveys, they do the training apps, and they can now track their employee engagement levels through our survey and how they're increasing. And they've just recently won the Great Place to Work award. And they will tell you themselves, it's because of working with us that they've achieved that. So they can track over the last 2 years, our employees are more engaged, they're more loyal than they were 2 years ago, they're more productive. So that's one of the examples of what we've done. Even in Malta, we're working with the Grand Hotel Excelsior, and they've just done their first employee survey, first digital online, and they've got the results now. So we're going to meet with them actually next week, help them interpret those results, prepare an improvement plan so that they can raise their own employee engagement levels. And they know, and we know, that if you increase your employee engagement levels, you increase your customer satisfaction levels. They're directly linked. And then in the Philippines, we work with a hotel group, and they've got small resorts and city centers, about 20 properties in total, all across the Philippines. And head office wanted to better understand what's happening against health and safety auditing in each of the hotels. So they use our checklist. They've been using it now for 3 years, right across the group. They do their weekly and monthly check. And head office can quickly see oh, this hotel is underperforming in this. We better look at that more closely, or this is the benchmark. So that's another example. And again, back to Malta, we're working, and I see one of them has joined us on the webinar. We're working with them on using our customer surveys so they can get closer. They're already close to their customers, but they'd like to understand feedback about breakfast and check-in and the bedroom. So better understand the experience so they can continuously improve because they have that mindset. And finally, then we work with another small hotel group called Photo Collection. They've been using our training app for, I think it's about 4 years now. And they can actually, they would tell you, they have better recruitment because they have better training because it's more structured. So they can show potential employees that if you work with us for a year, here's what you learn, and here's what your colleagues have learned in the last year. So they're attracting better quality employees because they've got a better attitude to training. So that's really brings me to the end of the talk, and I've just given some practical there. I suppose if I summed it up in a couple of ways, VUCA world is nothing to be afraid of, but we need to be conscious of it, and we need to be conscious of it as individuals and organizations. On the individual side, your mindset matters. I'd love to be 20, 30 years younger because the opportunities are going to be huge in that world. There's still a few for old fuddy-duddies like me, but there's plenty for the younger you are, the more opportunities there are. But they're only there if you grasp them. And you'll only grasp them if you have the mindset that, okay, I've got to get myself relevant in this new world. So that's the first thing. And you make yourself relevant by developing these new skills in multiple specialisms and transferable skills. And you position yourself for growth by what's the challenge? Where's my skill set? How am I developing both of those, raising the challenge? And then on the business side, whatever tools you use, that you have ways of looking at things on a more data-driven way. So forget about gut feeling. Gut feeling is good, but it shouldn't be the only way you think about your business. What are my real measures, particularly about my employees and my customers, that tell me how am I performing in those areas, but not only tell me that, guide me to get better. So I can look back in 12 months' time and say, my business is better this year than it was last year, and I could show you exactly why and how. So thank you very much for your time. It's been my pleasure. If any of you would like to connect with me, you can go to our website and you can free trial our tools, or you can contact me at that email. I'd love to continue the conversation. And if anyone has a Q&A or questions now, I'd be happy to take them. So I'll switch off my slides, but thank you all for your time. I know you're busy people. I hope you got something from that.
Thank you so much, Enda. So if anyone has any questions, now's the time to you can speak up. Excellent presentation, and I've learned a thing or two, and I hope everyone else did. If you have no questions, I would just like to thank you all for your attention and your time. As Enda said, I know you're all very busy. So this marks our last webinar. Thank you for your participation in the training program. We appreciate it, and we hope it's been beneficial to you all, because that is the point of it all. So have a lovely day, and thank you, Enda, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.